Welcome back to Figure Depot. Today we're taking a look at the evolution of the She-Hulk in action figure form. Hasbro has given us several versions, but these are sort of the highlights through the years. And starting way back there with the Savage She-Hulk from the Fin Fang Foom Build-A-Figure wave. Then coming in next, they released the Blob Wave She-Hulk. Then we got the A-Force She-Hulk, which was in a big multi-pack with several other figures. And then, last but not least, they gave us this very awesome, very wonderfully scaled, very beautifully sculpted She-Hulk from the 16 to 17 comic run, where she was in her gray form. And so that just released here at the end of 2019, technically billed as a spring 2020 release. So I wanted to go ahead and just start the new year taking a look at how She-Hulk has changed in action figure form through the years. You can see we got soft goods initially for the clothing of our She-Hulk when we did the Savage She-Hulk, and it's held up pretty well through the years. And I've had this since it was originally released, and so it has held up very well. I haven't just really used it a whole lot. It's been displayed off and on through the years with my other Hulk figures as shelf displays and things, but I haven't done a whole lot in terms of figure photography. I did a little bit this year in anticipation of this new She-Hulk release, and so it's had a little bit of wear, but overall it's held up very well and has stood the test of time. The only issue, of course, is the size. It is very, very undersized, and so while the sculpt was very nice, it's one of the most beautiful head sculpts that, you know, we had ever seen at that point, and you know, was really good for its time. But it just, the articulation overall of the figure is a bit limited, and we'll just get a quick look at that. So looking here at the articulation, you can see she has a ball peg, but there's no disc hinge, and so it's essentially just a swivel, and her hair is extremely stiff, so if you try to rotate it 360, it's gonna pop off. And anyway, so very limited in what she can do. She can look down decently, but just sort of a straightforward when you come up. But looking at the hair, there's no wash or anything. It's just a solid molded piece there of black plastic. So, you know, we can see early on they didn't do a whole lot with paint shading. Looking at the rest of the body as well, the only paint on the figure is her undergarments, and they're just painted white, no shading or anything. And so then we have this soft goods dress here. So very limited paint, articulation. You know, she can go out and she can rotate 360 and knock her head off again because the ball peg is just a hair loose. Over time it has been not as snug, but we didn't get a little bicep swivel here, and you notice the joints in the upper arms were exposed, where now in modern figures that's covered up. In modern figures now, of course, we do have a swivel here, and then but what they did do was give us a swivel here, so that swivel is there, it's just located here instead of here. And we've got a single jointed bend that doesn't even quite get 90 degrees, so it's more about a 100-degree bend probably. And then we did get a waist swivel and slight diaphragm crunch, more front to back, not side to side. Her head's really showing off today. And then the legs were on this weird joint here, where again we have a hinge here to go out. That hinge does rotate though, so if you want her to kick forward in a running pose, you have to turn it that way, then you have to bend the swivel here. So that gets you your running articulation. but balancing this figure in any sort of extreme pose is going to prove very difficult. So we can see the limits of the articulation. She does have a single bend here, which does not get 90 degrees. And then we have the a swivel and a very awkward looking pivot. So the functionality is there, but the appearance was a bit lacking. We do not get any sort of ankle rocker though. So again, posing her in any sort of dynamic pose is a challenge. It can be done, but it takes a lot of creativity to do so. But she will stand very easily in a neutral stance, of course. So then jumping ahead and looking here at this She-Hulk from the Blob Build-A-Figure wave, very attractive sculpt. She's much improved in terms of size, but the articulation again is a bit lacking. We only get 90-degree bends at the elbow. We have an exposed hinge on the shoulder again. We don't have a swivel at the bicep up here where it meets the shoulder. We do have the swivels here, just like Savage She-Hulk. The wrists do swivel and hinge on the Savage, and they do swivel and hinge on the Blob Build-A-Figure wave She-Hulk. So, you know, they did give us swivels there, which was nice. But the range of motion is a lot more limited than what we've seen in more modern figures. I think the most frustrating part of this figure is probably these Toy Biz style ball hinged hips. They look funky and they don't function super well. It's just difficult to balance, and especially with her not having an ankle pivot, and her ankle rockers are limited because the little back part of her shoe bumps this big ridge they put around her ankle, which I guess is just supposed to be one of the shoe straps, but when you try to go forward, it severely limits how far forward you can move her foot. So lots of challenges still. An improvement for sure over the previous iteration, but definitely still not quite up to today's standards. Looking at the hair, they did finally go with some paint detail. They gave us a really, they did like this dark green plastic mold and then did a light wash kind of over the top of it to kind of add the illusion of highlights. So we did get highlights in the hair, so they definitely started paying more attention to some of those finer details as they progressed. Then we fast forward quite a few years to, I think this was 2016 if I'm not mistaken, and we did get a real serious looking She-Hulk. So we have her kind of savage form, then we get her like sparkling personality. In most of her comic run, she has a very bubbly, outgoing personality, which came through really nice in that figure. Then we have this figure here where she's a bit more stern. She's leading a group, and so she has to be a bit more calculated, and so that really comes across in the way that the figure was designed. So the major downfall of this figure, besides slightly loose knees, is that her arms were very, very, very short. They're the same length as this very small Savage She-Hulk figure's arms, and they should be much, much longer for a figure that's legs are this tall. The torso is a bit oddly shapen. It just is. She's kind of got this weird segmented part. It looks like the upper torso should sit a little lower at this diaphragm joint on the lower torso, but it just comes across really segmented and awkward, almost like an insect. We did get a really nice deco on the face, and then in the hair we got some highlighting, so that was cool, you know, to still get that highlighting and everything, but it's very subtle, but you know, just kind of an okay figure with that A4 She-Hulk. And then we fast forward to the present, and we get this beautiful piece of craftsmanship here. She's just absolutely stunning. The sculpt is excellent. Not a ton of paint applications, except for, of course, the highlights in the hair, which look very nice. And, you know, but we get a lot of detail in the sculpt, which really brings out things that they would have formerly tried to use paint to bring out, and instead they've done it in the sculpt in this figure, and I think it translates very, very well. We do get swivels and hinges, all the modern articulation. The only thing that they did on this figure, which was a bit frustrating, but I have rectified myself, there was this massive notch in the little hinge joint here in the forearm, and so I took an X-Acto knife and I just cut that bad boy out. I just sliced it right there, and it had a big old notch sticking out, and it was just very ugly, very awkward. And now it's gone, and so she just has a real nice smooth transition there, and it's a single jointed elbow, but the range in it is very good, and gets you, you know, a 45, so really good range there, and an easy fix as far as the aesthetics are concerned. New design, new concept, not green like She-Hulk has classically been, so I hope that very soon they will give us a nice green version with this new updated buck. My number one choice would be a Savage She-Hulk reissue. Let's go back and revisit that first figure and make it everything that it needed to be, but they just couldn't pull off back then. And then of course we'd like to probably see this one again. So, but anyway, that's the evolution of the She-Hulk in action figure form, and she's just an awesome character. These have been really good figures. I'm very glad to have all of these in my collection. And let me know what you guys think. Which is your favorite version thus far? What would you like to see them do in the future? What would you have them change, perhaps, about the design of any of these figures in the future? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Happy New Year!